To the point, informative, entertaining, and protecting the Second Amendment, welcome back to Elfster's Rifles and Reloading and a review of the Vortex Micro 3X Red Dot Magnifier. Now, I'm sure some of you that follow me on Facebook and especially here on YouTube, you're probably wondering why I'm doing a review on a red dot magnifier. Some of you probably know, and I've expressed my concerns on using red dot magnifiers. I'm actually not a really big fan of them. I actually prefer using a low power variable scope, or just using the red dot by itself and co-witnessing that red dot with the smallest rear aperture on the rear backup iron sight, and using the stenopoeic effect of looking through that very small pinhole. That stenopoeic effect will make that red dot crystal clear, especially if you have a astigmatism problem. If you don't believe me, bring up your red dot. If you have a backup iron sight, flip that up, look through your smallest aperture. It will make that red dot crystal clear for doing detail work when you're not in a rush. But just like I mentioned in my Elfster's 101 series on scopes, how to use a scope in regards to minute of angle, mils, and also the purpose and preference of optics, I know some of you like using a red dot with a red dot magnifier. So just because I personally don't use them all the time, it doesn't mean that you don't. Now, I'm not going to say I've used all red dot magnifiers, but I will say that I've used most of them, from Vortex, Primary Arms, you name it, especially when I was first starting out. That's kind of a rookie mistake that most people make when they first start out with an AR of some sort. Gosh, you got to have that red dot with the flip the side magnifier because it's super tactical. That's what you do while you're video gaming and stuff like that. But with that said, I'm not going to say there isn't a purpose, and there's definitely a preference with some people when it comes to having a flip to the side red dot magnifier, and I get that. And I've definitely used them before in my video reviews. Matter of fact, I just got done using one not long ago, just a few weeks ago, with shooting that PSA AKP in 7.62 by 39, that 10.5-inch AK pistol. When I shot that out to 300 yards, I usually don't do this type of optic setup. It's a little strange for a firearm like this, but I figure I'd stretch the legs out on this PSA AKP out to 300 yards and just see what kind of groups we can get on that 12 by 12 plate down there, 12 inches by 12 inches. And so I decided to slap on my Vortex Strikefire 2 with the Vortex VMX-3T 3-power magnifier to see what kind of groups we can get out at 300 yards. So I got 10 rounds loaded up, and let's give this a whirl. I was using this very red dot, the Vortex Strikefire 2 with a 4-minute of angle red dot. I was using the other Vortex magnifier that I have, and it performed quite well. I think I hit that plate, that 12-inch plate at 300 yards. I think I only missed once, and it performed quite well. But with that being said, keep in mind when you're using a red dot magnifier, you know, for example, this one is a 3x. Not only does it zoom in on your image 3x, but it also magnifies your red dot. You know, if you're a weekend warrior and you're going out to the range, you're just shooting off a bench with a bipod or maybe a front sandbag, and you think you're going to do some detail work, especially at 100, 150, and you're trying to make bug hole groups, it's going to cover up probably damn near your entire target at 100 yards. So at least in my personal opinion, that's why I don't typically use magnifiers. And like I said, it doesn't mean that you don't, and there's not a purpose for it. And I think it's more for combat situations. You're trying to get an idea of what's going on downrange, but you're definitely not using this for detail work and for bug hole groups. Now, with all that said, and in my opinion, regardless if you're using a magnifier or not, I always recommend to try and get the smallest red dot that you can get. You know, I'm also a huge fan of the Romeo 5. Most of you guys know that has a 3-minute of angle red dot. And they also have some red dots out there that are 2 minutes of angle. So if you can try and get something that is in the 3 to 2 minute of angle size red dot, I would highly advise doing that. I'm a huge fan of the Strikefire 2, and it's probably because I use this mostly by itself and co-witnessing it, like I said previously, with my backup iron sight, and using that cenopeak effect to mitigate you know, the blurriness or the astigmatism of that red dot. But you know, if you like using red dot, just having a good time at the range, you know, these magnifiers do help get rid of that fuzziness a little bit, that astigmatism. And, you know, especially if you're getting a little older, you get the bifocals on, you might want to consider a red dot, and that might be something for you. But like I said, it is all about preference and purpose. So also, to be crystal clear on this, this was sent to me by Vortex, and I actually called Vortex and I asked them if I could get this because I was actually interested in it because of its compact size. You know, most of these red dots are much bigger than this, and that's why I wanted to check this thing out. And I did not pay for this, and I only have this for 60 days to check it out, get my opinion of it, and get my opinion to you guys. And I got to send this back to Vortex, otherwise I'm paying for it. And just want to be crystal clear to you guys, that does not skew my review whatsoever. Obviously, I'm sending this thing back, so I have no justification to say good, bad, or ugly. But, you know, enough of the BS talk. Let's jump right into the features and then head out to the range. We'll take a couple 5-shot groups and hit up a steel plate. Now for this test, I decided to use my Palmetto State Armory, my PSA KS47, which is actually the Gen 1 model. This is actually not the Gen 2, obviously, because it's using a standard AR-15 pistol lower with C Products magazines. And there's a reason why I decided to do this test with this particular firearm, because obviously it shoots 7.62 by 39 ammunition, and it has a heck of a lot more kick than a 223 or 5.56. And I really wanted to test that out to see if I could give myself a black eye, because these red dots are notorious for not having the best eye relief. You know, most red dot magnifiers, I should say, their eye relief is terrible on them, and the eye box is very, very small. You know, about the most you're ever going to get out of this is about 2 inches. And I'm going to splice in a picture here to show you, now just to give you guys an idea of the eye relief on this. Now, like I mentioned, If you want to get this magnifier back further, usually like I said before, I like to get this diopter usually in line with the back of the charging handle. That goes for pretty much most optics, regardless if it's a high power scope, low power, variable scope, or a magnifier. I personally would like to get that diopter, right in line with the back of that charging handle, especially if I want to pull out this buttstock. Right now with this buttstock all the way out, I am not getting a clear picture at all. I mean, this would be comfortable, and I'd have to increase my cheek weld up to here with my nose touching this charging handle. Now, this has a 7.62 by 39, and it has a kick. And you get this too darn close to your nose, or especially to your eye, either your nose is going to be bleeding or you're going to have a black eye. So keep that in mind. So if you want to bring this magnifier back some more, you're going to have to remove this backup iron sights. And I know that's a deal breaker for some people. But if you want to keep this backup iron sight on, you're going to have to move this up. It's the name of the game. And right now, I would say comfortably, right now that's not clear. I'd have to bring it up, but right there is a clear open picture of this magnifier. And if I take my finger up to my eye, I'm going to say it's like that. And that's it. That's about 2 inches, and that's about all you're going to get. And if you're using something hard hitting, like the 7.62 by 39, you got to be careful about that. Otherwise, you're going to have a busted nose or a black eye. What this particular setup looks like and how much eye relief I have to have a crystal clear view through this magnifier. And if you're new to the game, that's something you definitely want to keep in mind, is you're not going to get a huge generous eye box or eye relief on these magnifiers, and that's just the name of the game. They're evil. It's kind of their downfall. And I would say this Micro 3X is really no different than the other Vortex magnifiers. There's not much of a difference. It's a little bit better, but it's really nothing to balk about. But where this magnifier, in my opinion, really shines is obviously its small footprint. And that's why I wanted to check this out for you guys, because I found it quite interesting. And it takes up much less real estate on this rail. Now keep in mind, if you want to keep your backup iron sight like the way I have this set up right now, this is the furthest back you really should have your backup iron sight. It shouldn't go past this point. And obviously, you want to flip this up. If all this gets damaged and you need to use your backup iron sights for some reason, that's where this is going to be. And I have this magnifier as far back as I could possibly go. And you're eventually going to see here when I go out to the range that I pretty much have my nose to the charging handle on this setup. And I would say my buttstock is probably adjusted to about right there. And my nose is pretty much touching that charging handle just to get a clear picture through this magnifier. And if you want to bring this magnifier back, you're pretty much going to have to sacrifice your rear backup iron sight. You're going to have to take this off, which will allow you to bring this back. And I actually prefer to have any optic that I'm using on an AR, the back of the diopter in line with the charging handle. But like I said, in order to do that, you're going to have to remove your backup iron sight and sacrifice that. Now, the one thing that stands out to me instantly when I took this out of the box is its rugged nature. The housing on this thing is crazy durable. It's a very heavy duty aluminum. The Vortex mount with a QD adapter, and I'll show you here. You just push on this pops right out. You can take this off, you can put it right back on in seconds. It's awesome. And what Vortex did with this magnifier is perfect in my opinion. Obviously the small footprint, the QD mount, which you definitely want with a magnifier. And this is also reversible. If you're a southpaw and you actually want this to flip to the other side, you can definitely do that. You just pop these two screws around, you flip this around, and you can use this as a lefty or a southpaw. But the overall construction of this magnifier is over the top, and I'm actually quite impressed with it. And the flip to the side setup that they have on this Micro 3X compared to the previous is the way to go. It doesn't stop you. It's very tactile. I'm not worried about this jiggling around while I'm running and gunning. And you can easily flip this to the side, flip it back, and there is no wobble to this thing whatsoever. And like the previous model or version that's a little bit longer, you actually have to push a button and then flip it. And you don't want that, in my opinion. This is set up perfectly. And bravo to Vortex with this Micro 3X. If you want a red dot magnifier, in my opinion, this is the route to go. Now the diopter, it's got a solid tension to it. It's not flimsy. I like that. You're definitely going to want to play around with this to get a crystal clear red dot. There's also adjustment screws on here on the top and right. Now this doesn't adjust your zero. This just adjusts the red dot to center perfectly in your magnifier. So keep that in mind. And I'll actually try and splice in some video footage right now showing that adjustment. And it's very simple. Once you get this mounted, you just play with these two elevation and windage adjustments, the center of that red dot in the middle of your magnifier. So what you do is you get this zeroed first. Once you get that zeroed, install your magnifier, play around with your windage and adjustment on the magnifier itself to get that center, dead center of the magnifier itself. You might want to just quick double check zero using the magnifier. Most likely it's going to be the same, but it doesn't hurt to check. And otherwise, that's it. Now, in my personal setup here, I like to use caps. And if you are going to use the caps, you're going to have a little bit of space here, because otherwise you're not going to be able to use your caps at all. So like you can see, I could put my cap down here, and if this was any closer, this part, when I pop this cap out, would definitely hit this part, and it just barely clears. So if you're going to use this particular setup with the StrikeFire 2 with the Micro 3X, you're going to have to leave some real estate here between the magnifier and the red dot. And I wouldn't say the StrikeFire 2 is pushed all the way forward on the Picatinny rail of the receiver itself, but it's damn near. I think I only got about maybe 1 or 2 slots left to go. And, you know, that's another reason why I'm kind of a big fan of low power variable scopes, because, you know, this StrikeFire 2 along with this magnifier, I would say it's just as heavy, if not more heavy, than just this low power variable scope. And that's something also to keep in mind. You know, obviously I like this setup as it is with just the red dot and using a co-witness rear iron sight. And although this magnifier doesn't weigh a tremendous amount, and it's strange, the second you throw this magnifier on, you feel that weight difference in the overall weight of your firearm. So, you know, once again, it's all about purpose and preference and what you want on your firearm. Now, one last final note before we head out to the range here. In order to use this magnifier, you're pretty much going to have to use a red dot that has a lower 1/3 co-witness mount setup like this Vortex StrikeFire 2 in order for this to work. I'm not saying you have to strictly use it with a Vortex, but most likely it's going to need a 1/3 lower co-witness mount setup like this. You know, I know you guys watch me take those shots at 300 yards with the PSA AKP, and I did use this setup with an older generation Vortex magnifier, but you can notice in that video that I was actually cupping the buttstock with my left hand to create a cheek comb or a cheek riser so I could comfortably look through this optic setup, because you know, typically on an AK, you're going to use the low mount and not a lower 1/3 co-witness mount. You're going to try and get that red dot as low as you can possibly get it, so you got a comfortable cheek weld on at least an AK platform. So it's definitely something you want to keep in mind if you're going to attempt to do something like this on an AK. You're going to have to raise your cheek completely off the buttstock by using a lower 1/3 co-witness mount. And I would say this is more typical for an AR platform that has a straight Picatinny rail setup like this. And, you know, I guess this is enough of the BS talk. Let's take this out to the range. We'll take a couple 5-shot groups and we'll hit up that 10-inch steel plate at 50 yards. Okay, so we are rocking the PSA 7.62 by 39 KS47. Now this is actually the Gen 1. This isn't the Gen 2 that takes AK mags. This takes the good old C Products magazines. What I like personally, I like the Gen 1 better than the Gen 2 myself because I can use the same lower with this Gen 1 KS47 upper, and I could also use the same lower with my PSA 5.56 upper, which is kind of nice. I actually swap them back and forth and it works really good. But other than that, I got some Wolf really inexpensive 7.62 by 39 full metal jacket. If you're familiar with my channel, if you've probably seen this firearm in action before, and if you haven't, go to my playlist area. I have an entire series on just a specific firearm alone. But anyway, enough of the BS talk. Okay, let's get this going. Let's start this first 5-shot group. I'm shooting right over my camera, so I got nothing but faith in this firearm and optics. So that was 5 shots. Load up another 5. Now this is really inexpensive Wolf ammunition. I usually get shipped for about 18.5 cents a round. Alright, so let's load up 10 rounds this time. We're going to bang up that 10-inch steel gong down there at 50 yards. Let's hope to God my camera's not too close. I guess we'll find out. Well, 10 rounds goes pretty damn quick when you're having fun. All right. And wow, I would say those are some pretty damn impressive groups. Matter of fact, they might be actually the best groups I've ever had out of this firearm. Man, that's just really cheap Wolf, full metal jacket, steel cased ammunition, 19 cents a round shipped. I mean, at 50 yards, I would say that's roughly 3/4, maybe a little over 3/4 of an inch. This one's pushing about an inch, but for what this firearm is and for how inexpensive I got this thing for, that's pretty damn impressive. So let's check out this steel gong, this 10-inch steel gong, and for 10 rounds, that's pretty darn impressive too. Really nice tight group there. And yeah, really impressed so far. Anyway, let's score this up just like magic. Well, I gotta admit, these groups are pretty darn impressive. And if you've seen the video series on this particular firearm, the PSA KS47, I have a rather extensive video series on this firearm using just a red dot. These might be the best groups. I'm not sure. I'd have to go back and check out that old footage, but this is pretty darn impressive, especially for some really cheap, inexpensive Wolf Poly Performance 7.62 by 39 ammunition that I can usually hook up 1,000 rounds for about $185 shipped. So I'm pretty darn impressed. Now, like I said before, I probably will not go out and buy one of these. It's just my own personal preference. But if you are in the market for a red dot magnifier, in my opinion, this is definitely the way to go, especially it's a small footprint. And I think it's definitely worth the money. The eye relief is very comparable to the older model. I don't think you're going to gain much. It's very comparable, but keep in mind those notes I said before we headed out to the range about increasing the overall size of your red dot. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you learned something and you enjoyed watching me take those shots. And if you did, please like the video, subscribe, share, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys in the next video.